So this is Mr. Inslee's favorite topic, and we've had some fun with climate change over the last little bit. I've actually got a group of folks working on clean energy and climate policy to teach me more about that. As a business guy, that's not my prime set of knowledge. But what I can tell you is that it does appear that the Earth is warming. But you know what? The Earth is warmed and cooled for as long as we've had an Earth. I don't think that we can specifically tie man to that, particularly not with the science that we have. If we're going to bet our economy and our future and our manufacturing jobs on something like climate change, that science had better be rock solid. And what I can tell you is from what I've seen, there's some significant question about the data that they're using. There's some really significant question about some of the models that they're using. I've had some folks at Microsoft look at some of the publicly published models, and they are pretty iffy. And so I think that we need to do a great deal more work there before we impose a cap and trade system that's going to cost our economy trillions of dollars and is going to drive millions of dollars offshore. If you look at where cap and trade has been implemented so far, it's been implemented in Europe, it's been a colossal failure. It's had huge unintended consequences, and they are in fact cutting the use of carbon energy in Europe, but that's because they're closing down their factories and they're shipping them to India, which is not necessarily a good thing. And oh, by the way, the folks that are shutting down their factories, like the big steel factory, they're pocketing $1 billion or some absurd number in tax credits and so forth related to the cap and trade. This is not sustainable and not something that we need in the United States. We do need to cut our carbon. We need to cut the energy usage, but we need to do that in a sustainable way that makes sense for the United States.
First of all, we need to get our terminology straight. Seems like the liberals always beat us in linguistics. It's not called climate change. They called it global warming for a reason. Now they want to call it climate change. Why? Because as James said, the studies are starting to show that there hasn't been global warming, at least in the last 15 years, which is where they have trumped up that charge. And you don't have to believe me. Michael Mann, I almost said Michael Moore, that's a different case. Michael Mann and Phil Jones, the top two leading scientists in the global warming movement, were caught sending fraudulent emails where they admitted fraudulently cooking the books, using such terms as hide the decline. They were hiding the decline. And this is the guy that did Al Gore's hockey stick. Okay, using, quote, nature's trick. And the IPCC from the UN, they had predicted within 35 years the Himalayan glaciers would melt. Well, guess what? That came from one scientist, one opinion, one phone call, and he admitted that it was not based on any scientific research whatsoever. It was based on one man's opinion. And so the ecology, the environment, is way too important of an issue to go by junk science. And I don't think the government, based on their track record of not being able to handle anything appropriately, efficiently, effectively, can be trusted to handle something as important as our environment. I'm running on the pro-torture ticket. I do believe in torturing terrorists, if they're known terrorists. I think it works. And it's even showing now the administration is backpedaling from closing down Guantanamo Bay. I don't know why I've got this problem. But anyhow, I would be for keeping it there. I think it's serving a valid purpose to keep those people off our shores. I don't see any reason or any benefit to move them onto our shores or transfer them to another multi-million-dollar facility that would have to be built after we've already sunk millions of dollars into that facility. Politicizing it is what's going on, and I'm not really big on politicizing things.
So first I want to say that Americans don't torture. We're better than that. We sign on to the Geneva Convention. When we waterboard, it is not torture. It is an enhanced interrogation technique and something that has been vetted to make sure that it is not, in fact, torture. As far as Guantanamo Bay, I support Guantanamo Bay being open. It seems like a great idea to keep them there as opposed to here. And the second piece of that is the military tribunals versus civilian courts. These people are trying to kill us. They're doing so in a military fashion. To the extent that they are not U.S. citizens and deserve all the rights a U.S. citizen has, they should absolutely be kept in Guantanamo and tried in military tribunals.
Great.
So do I believe the Federal Reserve should be audited? Absolutely. I completely support the idea of auditing the Federal Reserve in a very serious way. There is a lot of secrecy that goes on around the Federal Reserve, its open market meetings and all the rest. And we need to have confidence if we're going to have that Federal Reserve as an organization. It needs to be fully transparent to us as the American people, and we need to know what's going on. So I fully support the serious auditing of the Federal Reserve. What I don't support is Bernie Sanders' version of auditing in a very light way one time, which has just passed the Senate. So there's going to be a negotiation between the House and the Senate, and hopefully we'll end up with a real Audit the Fed bill.
I'm not for just auditing the Fed, although that would be a very important first step that I would support, only if we can't eliminate the Fed. Thomas Jefferson said that a central bank is worse than a standing army. And they serve no purpose. People are like, oh, how would we live without the Fed? Most of our country, we've lived without a central bank. They have two main purposes, two main goals: to even out the highs and low in the economy. How's that work? Every economic bubble in the last century, they have had a hand in causing, a major hand in causing, including keeping interest rates near zero, so that people who couldn't afford to buy homes now are stuck with them. And when there is an astronomical amount of adjustable rate mortgages coming up to be reset next year, and we could very likely have Housing Meltdown Part 2 brought to you by our out-of-control government. The other objective they have is controlling inflation. How's that work? They haven't done either one. The Federal Reserve serves no purpose, and it should be ended. I agree with Ron Paul on this issue. End the Fed. And if we can't get enough votes to end the Fed, then audit the heck out of them, at least so we know what they're doing.